Joining me now, Democratic South Carolina State Representative Gambrell Garvin. Also with me, Julie Roginski, Democratic strategist and author of the Salty Politics newsletter on Substack. Representative Garvin, thanks so much for being with us. Jim Clyburn accuses Republicans of creating Jim Crow 2.0. Is he right?
Absolutely, Chris, and thank you for having me. We in South Carolina and the South Carolina House of Representatives are fighting regressive policies, and we've been doing that, Chris, for the last couple of days, and we will continue to do that as well throughout the day and well into the night, Chris. What we see today and what we've been seeing throughout the South is an attempt to take us backwards. I have a quote that I often like to say, and that is it's starting to feel more like 1966 and not 2026. And with that being said, Chris, we are fighting against bad policy. We are fighting against voter disenfranchisement. And it's going to be really important that we stand up and that we make our voices heard and say that we're not going back. We can't go back because we've come too far to turn around now.
Is there anything you're hearing, Representative, from your Republican colleagues to suggest that this will get any significant pushback on their side?
Chris, the sad thing about it is that Republicans in South Carolina, starting with Governor McMaster, have all yielded to Donald Trump. Donald Trump made the call. Donald Trump has told Senate leaders as well as House leaders what to do, and they are all falling in line. Now, there were a couple of senators last week that stood up and said that we weren't going to pass the Sign It Out resolution over in the Senate, but by and large, the Republicans are falling in line, even the ones that don't like it. And guess what, Chris? So many of them are probably coming up to Democrats telling us, thank you. Thank you for fighting these bad bills. And our retort is simple. Join us. Join us in fighting for our democracy. Join us in fighting for the will of South Carolinians, because quite honestly, what we're seeing is truly an attempt by Washington, D.C., by President Trump to tell us how our map should be drawn for political advantage.
There are Republicans who are concerned, it seems, Julie, about if the logistics, if nothing else. The state Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey says this plan could backfire because it's being rushed. Here, take a listen.
If you're going to flip-flop on something like that, it would have been a whole lot better for everybody if you'd have just done it a few months ago and to have given time to plan this, do it the right way.
So at least somebody is expressing publicly, too, right? Some concern, but is it just not worth it to invoke Trump's ire?
Well, I think everybody on the Republican side is looking at what happened in Indiana a few weeks ago. They're looking at what happened in Louisiana with Bill Cassidy yesterday. We'll see what happened with Tom Massey today. We'll see what happens with him. But look, the reality is that the Republican Party is held hostage to one man who has, I don't know the last time he set foot in South Carolina, but certainly he's done it for political reasons. He doesn't know South Carolina. He doesn't know the South. He's from down the street here in New York. And so, you have an entire region of the country that is completely in thrall to this man. And I would simply say that you also have a Supreme Court where the Chief Justice has been working since the Reagan administration to gut the Civil Rights Act, and he's done it. And the reality of that means that black voters in the South who have been disenfranchised for the entire history of this country, who were given an opportunity to have equal representation back in the 1960s, now are going back to a time, as the representative said, that I certainly have never lived through, and I think most people in this country have never lived through. It is just astonishing at what's happening. We're about to have no black representatives, in South Carolina, where the black constituency is tremendous. I mean, Jim Clyburn is about to potentially lose his seat. And as a Democrat, I will say South Carolina delivers the Democratic nomination every single time for every single Democratic candidate. They did it for Barack Obama. They did it for Joe Biden. They will do it again for the next Democratic president. It is much more important than Iowa and New Hampshire. And to have that state be so disenfranchised and those black voters be so disenfranchised, it is astonishing that we're living in what is called a democracy, but clearly is not anymore.
So, Representative, there is another possibility that some Republicans have suggested as a concern, maybe quietly. And that is the possibility that creating a new map could end up spreading the Republican voter base in your state so thin that it opens up more possibilities for Democrats. Is that at all possible?
It's certainly possible, Chris. Anything is possible, and this could be a dummy mander. And you know what? I will say that I hope that is the case. But as the other guests just mentioned, this is a time in our history that we have to all be vigilant. That we all have to say that there should never be a time where a state that's nearly a third African American cannot. African Americans will not be able to have the ability to elect candidates of their choice. And let me tell you what this current map that they have proposed does. It splits up the urban centers. It cuts and dilutes the black vote to a point where in my community, Richland County, we're split 3 ways. So we will not be able to have any meaningful impact on any of those congressional districts, thus diluting the voice and the impact of black voters. Last week, state leaders gathered here in Columbia for a monument to honor an individual named Robert Smalls, who was one of the congressional members from the Reconstruction era. And this monument is going to be a wonderful and long overdue tribute to Congressman Smalls. But the thing that I found ironic, Chris, is that Robert Smalls fought for civil rights. He fought for African Americans to be able to have a voice. And it wasn't until Jim Clyburn got elected in 1992, only 6 months after I was born, that we had another African American elected. So you're talking about an over 100-year period where black folks in South Carolina did not get a chance to have a voice, did not get a chance to have a seat at the table. And now we are facing a situation where it might be another 100 years where African Americans will not be able to have a voice. And the sad thing about it, Chris, is that my generation, as a 35-year-old, my kids are going to have less rights than their parents, as well as their grandparents and their great-grandparents. And it is shameful. And here in South Carolina, Democrats are saying that we will not stand for it and we will not take it quietly.
It was really interesting, the New York Times poll. One of the things that I noticed was that they broke down the numbers by region. And when they asked about whether the state of the economy, Representative, was excellent or good, this is in the South. This is Southern voters. 3% said they found it excellent. 21% said they found it good. If you can't convince people that there is equity, voter rights that are being eroded in a most egregious way, what is the economic message that's getting through, or is it getting through on the Democratic side where you live?
Absolutely. So folks, the economy, when you go to the gas station, we have gas that's $4.15 and for a gallon of gas. I just filled up my truck this morning and it took over $100, where just a few months ago, that same truck took a whole lot less to fill up. And so folks do feel the pocketbook issues here in South Carolina. And at the end of the day, I think people this November are going to vote on pocketbook issues. The Republican Party, Donald Trump, they know that folks are not happy and they're unpleased with their policies. And so thus they are trying to truly steal as many seats as they possibly can. And he has done this with the assist of a radical Supreme Court that has honestly done everything that it possibly could to overturn precedent. So pocketbook issues, Chris, to answer your question, are really important to all of us here in South Carolina. And I think voters are going to vote with their pocketbook come this November.